I'm Andrew Wasson. Thanks for joining me for my weekly guitar blog. It is May 5th, 2013, and this week we're going to cover the fundamentals of phrasing. And this question was sent in from Jose. He's from Mesa, Arizona, and he wrote in with this email to me. Oftentimes I'll read how the top musicians each have their own specific approach to phrasing. What I cannot understand is how exactly phrasing could even have any certain type of an approach. Phrasing, to me anyway, seems so incredibly random. Could you help explain phrasing approaches and maybe show a few examples of phrasing ideas too? I hope my question makes sense. Thank you, from Jose in Mesa, Arizona, USA. Well, hey, thanks very much for writing in, Jose. Phrasing is an area that will generally mystify many students when they explore composing and improvisation, and it can really turn into something of an issue for musicians during many of their early years of study. And the problem with formulating some type of generalized approach to phrasing is that it is a very unique thing to every person's ear. And since what one person likes is certainly not what every person likes, it can be rather difficult to choose one particular path for developing everybody's sense of phrasing ability. So let's head to the guitar neck and explore several important elements that relate to better phrasing in general. When it comes to phrasing lines, one of the most important concepts is to understand there's a difference between theory and the natural grammar of well-connected musical lines. At some point, musicians have to put in the hours doing two very important things, transcribing other people's musical ideas and practicing our own unique creations of just raw flowing musical lines. In my first example, I have a very simple musical phrase, and it not only demonstrates how musical ideas do not need to be locked into a key signature, but it also demonstrates that not every musical phrase must be a busy idea. A song like the jazz standard Autumn Leaves has a very simple melody, but it flows well and it connects. And I'll play my musical line now, and notice how simple this is. Now, another idea that's very important to learn that you don't have to break a sweat and be incredibly technical or fancy with how you play. You're not in a gymnastics competition. In my first example, I had a very basic and simple line that was composed of those double stops. But in my next example, the line really flows well, and it says something simple that the listener can relate to in a single note sense. And, that's really huge. If a listener begins to anticipate notes and begins to follow in their mind as the melody progresses, you as a player or a writer truly have their attention. If you can start getting the listener to say to themselves something like, "I feel like I've heard this and I think I know the next note," then that's excellent. However, if the listener said to themselves, "I don't get this, where is this going?" then either one of two things possibly could be going on. Either the listener cannot relate to maybe a certain type of music that you're playing, like jazz or another complex form of music, or possibly they just simply cannot relate to your own phrasing. Sometimes music is so disjointed and poorly phrased that the listener cannot stand how oddly the parts fit together. So have a listen to this next melody of mine and try anticipating where upcoming notes are going to travel beforehand. Now, on the first pass of that phrase, you probably didn't have a good idea that it would head down into those lower pitches. However, when it moved into the next line after that brief scale run, and it started the idea of the phrasing again, you may have been able to anticipate the next idea, the next lower idea. Listen to it again. So that's what I mean about being able to anticipate lines. If your listener can do that, there's a very good chance that they're going to automatically almost prefer or like your music. Now, the next melody I have contains a line that is phrased in a manner that does not really allow for the listener to grasp where the line might be headed. And this type of sound, although it's interesting to some musicians, unfortunately leaves many listeners in the dust. The issue with lines and music that are disjointed comes down to the fact that this style of phrasing limits the audience. The bulk of people in the world cannot grasp odd melody. Most listeners enjoy diatonic lines, especially people without any exposure to sophisticated musical styles, such as maybe styles like jazz or the jazz fusion style, or maybe even some classical music. Now, if a person has only ever really listened to pop songs and the common, I guess we could call them inviting sounds of the popular radio-friendly harmony and melody, something like a bitonality composition or the sound of an altered scale might be way too much for them. So have a listen to this next melody and try to gather what I mean when I say how things can be somewhat disjointed. Now, one final idea I wanted to present is that of how phrasing lines through arpeggios can offer the listener something completely fundamental, something that very easily resonates with them. Rather than playing music that is very linear, such as a basic 7-tone scale, or maybe a pentatonic scale phrase, we can do other ideas based wholly around arpeggios. Now, since arpeggios, especially directly arpeggiating chords, like for instance, if I had an A minor chord and I just arpeggiated the entire chord, just like that, that type of an approach can connect more in terms of the straight intervals found within the chord. The sound is easily accessible, and plus the intervals of thirds and fifths become spread out with the arpeggio shape rather than linear as with a scale, or just how you would directly have them flow if you were just playing an arpeggio across the fretboard. And the bonus with it is you can have the notes ring out over top of one another. So it becomes a very interesting part to have rhythmically in the background since it's sustaining. Now, have a listen to how the contour of the melodic phrases are with this arpeggiated chord sequence melody that I have. Well, even though I've only covered a few ideas to do with phrasing approaches, I hope that the overall concept is perhaps a little clearer. Now, the important thing in the long run is, of course, discovering your own unique voice. Discovering your own ways of being an individual on the instrument with melody is the goal. However, actually getting there will revolve around 3 key factors of practice, and these include the study of transcription, composition, and the dedication to constantly improving the ability to play what you hear in your head. Along the way, pay particular attention to dynamics. How each note gets performed plays a big part to do with phrasing. I'll leave you with a great quote by guitarist Pat Metheny. He said this during an interview back in 2002, "The phrasing component of how you make a line speak is what gives it its architecture." So how we perform lines rhythmically, technically, or using our dynamics or our own individuality will ultimately determine the overall effectiveness that the phrasing has upon our listener. Anyway, that's about all the time I have for today. As always, thanks for watching. Have yourself a great week, and I'll catch up with you next time. Bye for now.